Hi, everybody. Pastor Tim Warren here with your daily Bible study. If you have your Bibles, we're going to be in the book of Mark, chapter 5, verse 25. And I want to kind of set the stage. Jesus is walking through the streets, and he has a crowd around him because in those days, Jesus was a celebrity. So he was constantly followed by people, constantly had people trying to get to him. You know, if we had somebody who was walking around and being able to heal the sick, raise the dead, there would be flocks of people around him. And so it's no different in Jesus' day. When they find out he can do this, they all come to him. And so in the book of Mark, chapter 5, verse 25, it says, "Now a certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years, and had suffered many things from many physicians. She had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, 'If only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well.' Immediately the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the affliction. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that power had gone out of him, turned around in the crowd and said, 'Who touched my clothes?'" And so I want to talk a minute about Jesus being a celebrity. You know, in our day today, we have lots of celebrities, and celebrities are so big. You see, if you see them on the street, people flock to them. If you see them around, people automatically crowd around them. And there was a movie filmed in Rockmart, Georgia, last year in May. And so I drive through Rockmart on my way home from work. And so I stopped in Rockmart that day. And I got there probably about 3:30, somewhere in there. And so I stood around and I started waiting because I love Steve Carell. Steve Carell is one of my favorite actors. I think he's funny. I loved him in The Office. And so he was filming this movie. And so I went and I stood around, and I probably waited for a couple hours. And so all of a sudden I see this guy who I've seen on multiple television shows and multiple movies walking across the street. And so I walk across the street and I go to this crowd of people, and everybody's around him. Everybody has things for him to sign. Everybody wants a picture with him. And so I get through this crowd and I get him, and I had him sign my first year teaching yearbook. And there's a picture of me and him together that should be on the screen. And, I got to take my picture with him. And it was an awesome experience because, I knew of Steve Carell. I had watched him, and it was cool to meet him. And so I waited a little bit later and actually ran into a fourth grade teacher that was trying to meet him and get a picture with him as well. And so I waited with her and her son. And so whenever he came back out, I pushed through the crowd because it wasn't going to be long before he left. I pushed through the crowd going, Mr. Carell, can they get a picture with you?" And so I got them through the crowd. They got their picture. The thing I want to focus on, because this is not a devotional about Steve Carell. Do not be afraid. What I want to focus on is what lengths are you willing to go through to get Jesus? You see, for me to meet Steve Carell, this guy that I really like, I had to fight a crowd. I had to wait. I had to be persistent. And this is demonstrated by the woman with the issue of blood. You see, around Jesus as he's walking down the street, there is this huge crowd of people. He's not right there in plain reach. So I imagine that she is crawling and she is pushing through all these people, through all these groups, and she just grabs the hem of his garment. You go through Walmart and you go through Kroger, you get bumped and you don't think a thing of it. Jesus was probably getting bumped from every side. But as soon as she touched him, he said, "Who touched my clothes?" And it continues on, but his disciples said to him, "You see the multitude thronging you and say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see her who had done this thing, but the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction." And so right there, he had been bumped, but what happened was this woman had faith. This woman needed a miracle. So when she reached up, glory left his body and he was alerted, because he knew there was something different about that touch than every other touch. That woman had a desire, that woman had a need, and he was able to meet it that day. My question to you is, during this time, are you taking the opportunity to grow closer to Christ? Are you taking that opportunity, being persistent in your faith? Are you praying without ceasing? Are you continuously in the Word? How close do you want to get to God? What are you seeking from God in this time? Because this time is the perfect time to grow closer to see your miracle. You know, Pastor Sean, in one of the Bible studies this week, is discussed being filled with the Holy Spirit with the evidence of tongues, being filled with power from on high. And I am a very big proponent. I love to encourage people to be filled with the Spirit. I want to see everybody filled with the Spirit. Even my friends that aren't Pentecostal, I tell them, look, you need to pray for this because this thing is awesome. If you want that and you haven't ever had that experience, this is the perfect time to seek the infilling. But you may go, well, I don't need that miracle, or I already have that miracle. Well, that's fine. What do you need? What are you praying for? Are you continuously praying and seeking and holding on to the promises of God? You know, if we had a celebrity walk through the streets, we would all cleave to them. Jesus can do so much more than any celebrity can. Jesus can do so much more than any government official can, and he's right there. All you have to do is say, Lord, and he immediately turns his ear to us. Isn't that awesome? So I want to encourage you to spend time with him, get closer to him in this time, and I want you to continue praying for what you're seeking, because I know that he's going to hear you and he's going to answer it. May not be in the way you expect, but he's going to answer your prayer. The Bible tells us this plainly. I hope you've enjoyed this time. I've enjoyed talking with you, and I hope to see you again soon here at Irwin Hill Church of God.